All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Breakdown Daily Recap. I'm Breaky CPK, of course, and today is January 26th, 2018, and we have plenty to talk about, so don't want to take too much time introducing. We got ESL 1 Genting, of course. We're going to recap that. We're going to talk about the official announcement from Valve on Dota TV that happened. I'm honestly a little bit shocked with the way that they said it as well, and what the point that they made, so we'll talk about that shortly. Also go over a couple of roster updates worth mentioning, and then the last chance qualifiers for the North American region, of course, happening for the ESL 1 Katowice tournament, the major that's coming up. That happened last night for the grand finals. Animal Planet versus Optic. We'll touch on that. Let you guys know who indeed did win. So first things first, talking about ESL 1 Genting. Of course, recapping the matches. So I just got finished actually doing going over the replays. Again, I wasn't able to stay up throughout the night to watch the matches themselves, so I didn't get to see the production either, which I'm a little bit disappointed in. I could obviously go back at that. I might stay up tonight to indeed to watch it, but the matches themselves ended up being pretty one-sided, frankly, in both of the series. We had two series. We had Newbie versus Vici Gaming to kick it off, and then that was followed by a very hyped match in Virtus Pro versus Evil Geniuses. Starting with Newbie versus Vici Gaming, game number 1 kicked off. Young 11 on the Omni Knife for Vici Gaming, actually. He got caught out in key fights, and he could not cast his abilities. That's what I have as one of my key points for that game. There was at least 3 different fights where one he got Fiend's Grip on the other team, another one he got Black Cold. Newbie also making a point to put Kaka on Naga Siren, in fact, both games, and he did have some sleep setups both games, including the first game with a Black Hole on top of it, that ultimately just really secured the victory for Newbie. Vici Gaming even had the top 3 core net worth in the game at around the 20-minute mark or so. So it was actually looking pretty good for them, but because of a couple of, being out of position, some mistakes happened, and like I said, the Omni Knight specifically getting caught out ultimately earned the victory for Newbie. In game number 2, Newbie actually went with a Zeus pickup, which is not the most typical hero, but they were facing against a Tinker as well as a Bounty Hunter. And I think the Bounty Hunter matchup specifically is what really won it for Newbie. They completely took Bounty Hunter out of the game. They killed him over and over and over again. He got very minimal track kills. And on top of all of that, Legion Commander, actually, for Vici Gaming, he got very little to no duel victories. In fact, I'm pretty sure by the end of the game, when it was significant at least, he only had 1 duel kill at about 30 minutes or so, pretty much when the game ended. So, and then, yeah, another point I made is that, once again, Newbie, they've been liking some Naga Siren as of late. So, again, helping to win with that right there. As far as the other series, so again, Newbie advancing on, they'll face Team Secret later on today. As far as the other series, Evil Geniuses versus Virtus Pro, Evil Geniuses looking strong in this series. It started off with their Game 1 victory over VP, where they actually ran a Tinker in an aggressive tri-lane, which is just completely unheard of, I feel like, at least, unless I'm missing something right here. But that kind of leads me to another point in this event, real quickly, that we've been seeing a lot of just funky stuff happening this event, and I don't know if I'm the only one that's feeling that. And obviously, I know so many people are caught up with the whole Facebook drama and everything. But for those that have been paying attention to the event itself, we've been seeing some funky stuff, and this is just one of several things. We've seen a Night Stalker mid play this core. We've seen Kunkka mid. We've seen Shadow Demon mid. We've seen Battle Fury built on all these different melee cores, from Phantom Lancer to Terrorblade, etc. So there's been some interesting stuff happening, and this is just another one of those. But it kind of made sense, and I think the biggest reason they decided to do it was because Tinker wasn't really favorable in the other matchups, specifically against the Queen of Pain, and as a result, they were allowed to put Abaddon against the Queen of Pain, and Samael on the Abaddon, he actually wrecked no one playing the Queen of Pain. I mean, it wasn't a complete domination, but he had a fairly significant lead, and we saw that impact take off. Also, Chaos Knight being played by Ramses for Virtus Pro, he could not have a good time that game. He was going up against the lasers of Tinker, he was going up against a Rubik Fadebolt spam, and on top of all that, a Radiance pickup fairly early on in the game on Abaddon just really secured it, where he was able to get no farm pretty much throughout the whole game. So Queen of Pain, no one did eventually get things going. He was topping the net worth for a good amount of the game, but him alone, he was not able to do enough, especially when the BKB started coming out for Evil Geniuses. And they eventually ran them over in game number 1 because of that. So game number 2, Death Prophet pick from Virtus Pro, as I've suggested several times. I mean, personally, it feels like this hero just isn't the best for winning games ultimately. He's a great hero for winning the laning phase, but when it comes down to winning actual games, it seems like it just dies off quite a bit. And this was another example of that. I feel like here. No one, of course, playing it, but more specifically in this game, it was once again had to do with Bounty Hunter, but this time in a more positive sense. Bounty Hunter being played by Misery for Evil Geniuses. He was actually harassing the hell out of solo on Chen this game from Virtus Pro, and Chen was completely taken out pretty much because of that. So they essentially were playing one hero down, it almost felt like, on the side of Virtus Pro. And big shout out to Crit as well on Rubik. He had a fantastic series. He played Rubik both of the games here in this series, and he was stealing abilities at the correct times, it felt like, and he was making some big plays constantly throughout both of these games. So, but across the board, Evil Geniuses looking good, and they proved me wrong, as I know as a lot of other people out there, in terms of pulling up the victory and doing it so in pretty decisive fashion. This wasn't even really that close of a series when I went back to look at the replays. So again, 2-0 EG. They move on to play Team Liquid. Of course, another very hyped matchup. So our top 4 is set. We got Secret versus Newbie and Liquid versus Evil Geniuses. Cannot be more excited that these two matchups are taking place. Happening tonight, and then the finals, of course, will be best of 5. Quick note on that, Sumail, he actually sent out this tweet after their victory, and I quote, EG is still not top tier. You fucking punks are never satisfied, are you? Hope you enjoy being bitter, because I definitely love being the greatest. The modest Sumail. Always so, always so calm. No, it's, I chuckle when I see this. Obviously, he's still a younger man in general, and, it's great to see emotion, I feel like, and that part of it's great, and I love to see it. And I'm always a fan of seeing emotion and seeing reactions from players, when they're hyped up, or, maybe when they're not, a little bit. The trash talk, I should say, is I've never been a huge, I've been a huge fan of, even, as long as, there's some limits, of course, but trash talk I think is overall healthy. Now, I will say on this, again, I'm one of these people that's been advocating. I'm not too sure on the whole Evil Geniuses roster move and when it happened and how things have swapped up for them. And not to say that they're going to completely flop by any means, but I just didn't know if it was really going to lead them to better success than they were having before. So far, it's seeming decent so far. They got to the finals of Galaxy Battles before getting 3-0 by VGJ Storm. And now here they are, some decent momentum. Again, I will say, let's, hold back a little bit. It's sure Virtus Pro, a fantastic team. I predicted them to win the whole thing even, so there is that. But let's, maybe if they won the tournament, then I could see this being a little more appropriate. But clearly he's a bit frustrated. It's understandable. There's been a lot of trash talk, and I'm sure he's been having trouble, keeping that in. So, good for EG, though. Good for Sumail. And things seem like they're connecting right now. But they got a tough matchup against Team Liquid. One other thing I wanted to touch on the kind of recapping the event before we move on, the hero stats, once again, taking a look back at this, obviously we have a little bit more data now to go with. This is now, we've had 4 days of matches, quite a bit. We see some interesting numbers. One that really stood out to me was Witch Doctor here. Witch Doctor is 1-13 in this tournament. Now, again, it's still, I'm not saying that this suggests Witch Doctor is completely overrated. If anything, I think it deserves creating a discussion in terms of why is the hero doing so poor. Now, the first thing you have to look at is the breakdown of who played him. Obviously, if there's the underdog matches, then, of course, you almost got to take those away. And when I was going through this, because I took that in consideration, there was only 3 matches in my mind where it was a clearly underdog team. 2 of them being SG Esports, one against VG, one against Virtus Pro, and another one Penta versus Liquid. I think it's safe to say that was quite the outmatch right there. Other than that, I feel like it's not overwhelming to the point like, oh, that's why that team lost, or they were going to lose anyways, I should say. So even when you take out those 3 games that were clearly underdog teams playing them, it's still a 1-10 record. That's still pretty awful. And even if you take out a couple more, like there was some like okay maybe on the fence, it's still a 1-8 record. Like you get my point. It's the hero's not performing too well at this event. So I don't know what to take for that. I feel like the hero is a good hero, and it's obviously there's reasons why he's being picked up. But yeah, as Nahas goes back to, stats don't lie, so maybe that's something to look into for these teams. All right, so that's ESL 1 Genting. Again, can't wait for it tonight. Now, that leads us into this. I really don't want to make these daily recaps, continue to make them all about this drama, and, I want to try to, really conform these daily recaps or make them a little more compacted, is the more appropriate word. With that said, I do want to touch on this real quickly. Valve did make an official post on the Dota TV streaming situation, which, again, I'm a little bit surprised they did, especially with the result of it, how they essentially say, so, and I quote here, the first issue we've been discussing is regards to DMCA notices. DMCA notices. This one is very simple. No one besides Valve is allowed to send DMCA notices for games streamed off of Dota TV that aren't using the broadcaster's unique content, camera movement, voice, etc. So that basically is them saying to ESL, guys, you can't DMCA. Don't do it anymore. Now, the second issue is regards to who is permitted to cast off of Dota TV. We designed the Dota TV guidelines to be flexible in order to allow for up-and-coming casters or community figures like BSJ or Bulldog, shout out to those guys, that occasionally watch tournament games on their channel to be able to stream off of Dota TV. It is not to allow commercial organizations like BTS to compete with the primary stream. It'll be our judgment alone on who violates the guidelines and not any other third parties. So this is definitely, once again, another step in the direction of, okay, now I think we're kind of all on the same page here, but there is still a little bit of murkiness there. And I think one great example was brought up by Capitalist in a tweet that he sent out, was that what's to decide, a commercial organization, right? Like, if Capitalist was to, get Blitz and maybe a couple of the casters to kind of just chill cast from their homes, these tournament matches, not necessarily representing a studio or anything like that, just kind of doing it on their own streams, is that a commercial organization? Or is that just simply dudes hanging out on Twitch casting matches? It's still, and as Valve does say, they're going to be the ultimate judge, and I think if it got to that point, they would then again step in and be like, yeah, you guys can't do that, clearly you're abusing the system. And so, although we're still not getting a very, very absolute clear picture, it still is a lot better than where we were before. And, obviously the community considers this a victory, and I understand that perspective against ESL especially. Again, they really did get shut down by this, safe to say. So, but I still don't think this is the end of this by any means. Just like before's blog post, the previous one, this is definitely not the end of this situation. There's still going to be more chapters, I have a feeling, to what's going on right here. All right, the last chance qualifier, as I mentioned, ESL 1 Katowice, a major event. We got down to 2 teams, Optic Gaming versus Animal Planet. We knew it was going to be a good series, and boy, did it end up being a good series. I got the chance to catch at least a couple of these games. Shout out to Raw Dota, actually, on Twitch. He was actually casting. I believe he casted the whole series even. I caught the last couple of games, though, at least. Animal Planet was actually up 2-1, but then Optic Gaming managed to come back, force the 5th game, and then ultimately take it in game number 5, which actually was a very one-sided. It was one of those games where you could just tell, like, the teams were grinding 4 games in a row already. They were definitely exhausted and mentally exhausted, I'm sure, at a point. But Optic Gaming just seemed a little bit stronger in that Game 5, and they did advance on as a result. They're going to a major. That's, a feel-good moment for them, I'm sure. Animal Planet, or perhaps the former Digital Chaos, or not the former, the future Digital Chaos, who knows. They come up just short. And, obviously this would have been pretty significant for them being a new team. They're still a great, great team, and one that's going to be the one to reckon with in the NA region for sure. But at least in this matchup, Optic Gaming does get the better of them. Couple of roster updates, one being a little bit surprising. 1437 officially removed from TNC. As he puts it in the tweet here, pizza party concluded. Love Filipino fans no matter what. TNC will go back to a full Pinoy roster and take a different route. As for me, I have no idea what I'll do as of now. I had the chance to interview 1437 after the whole Team NP situation and him joining TNC in the first place last season. And one of the big things for him, which kind of made sense, why he wasn't a huge fan of the NP situation, was because of how it was dealt with the roster changes and how he wanted to be on a team that was going to grind through the ups and downs. And obviously, as we know, with Eternal Envy and the drama that he's been through, he has a history of, making moves that seem a little bit questionable. So, that was in the past, though. He thought he had a new home in TNC, and for a while here he did, that he could respect a lot more in that sense. But I got to, with this tweet, you don't necessarily see that. This is obviously a somewhat nice tweet in the end, but something tells me, it's not too happy, I'm sure. It doesn't seem like that this was his decision by any means. It was more of TNC's decision, and so I'm sure he's not the most, happy camper right now, especially with the timing, because I forget the exact date, but it's coming up where the roster locks are happening, and it's kind of putting him in a spot now where, is there going to be a team that he can join at, if anything, simply as a substitute, possibly as a coach? Obviously, he has a green mind when it comes to Dota 2 and drafting and everything, so that's probably the most likely spot we'll see him in at this time, unfortunately, but you never know. As far as who's going to replace him, don't really know just yet. Are they going to go back to Ryor or somebody else from the Philippines? That seems like it's going to be somebody from the Philippines, though, for TNC there. And then one more piece of news, Alliance, back in the news once again, kinda. Mickey, the mid player, of course, for the team, and they're planning to make their debut coming up here in the Dota 2 Asian Championship EU qualifiers, which are set to happen in early February. There was an update on Mickey's injury. He's been dealing with an injury, somewhat of an unknown injury of sorts that's kind of newer in the esports world. I believe it has something to do with his arm, if I'm not mistaken. I was honestly looking through it, and it was hard to 100% tell exactly. I don't even know if they ever make a point what exactly. Neurologic thoracic outlet syndrome is somewhat the result of a long static strains an esports athletes needs to endure in order to be a top player. So, point is, he's been dealing with this injury. It's obviously Chessie comes to mind when you hear something like this for complexity. He's also been dealing with something like that for a long time. He's been able to get to a point where he's comfortable playing again, though, at the top tier level. It seems like that Alliance is officially making a point here that Mickey's good to go. He's not 100% necessarily, but he's ready. They've been working with doctors and everything to figure this stuff out, get the appropriate physical therapy going, and make it happen. So Mickey's good to go. Alliance, we're going to see their debut on February 6th again with the Dota 2 Asian Championship EU qualifiers. And that's that. The daily recap officially coming to a close, guys. So once again, I want to thank you as always for tuning in on January 26th, 2018. Feel free to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, any of the social media there, as well as Twitch, of course. And also subscribe to my YouTube channel. It helps a lot. Really do appreciate it, guys. We'll see you guys next daily recap. Okay.